A conference to announce the 2016 Provincial Governance and Public Administration Index, or PAPI, took place in Hanoi on April the 4th, 2017. The index reflects citizen experiences in 6 dimensions, including participation at local levels, transparency in local decision-making, vertical accountability, control of corruption in the public sector, public administrative procedures, and public service delivery. According to PAPI 2016, the biggest improvement was reported in public service delivery, particularly health care services. Specifically, the proportion of survey respondents having social health insurance rose from 62% in 2015 to 73% last year, while 32% of respondents described healthcare services for children under 6 years old as very good, up from 23% in 2015. PAPI 2016 shows that Cần Thơ City topped the country in terms of people's satisfaction. Runner-ups include Hà Tĩnh, Đà Nẵng, Phú Thọ, Quảng Bình, and Bến Tre.
Kết quả xác định chỉ số PAPI được công bố hàng năm đã phản ánh tương đối chính xác về năng lực điều hành, quản lý của bộ máy chính quyền địa phương trong thực thi chính sách và cung ứng dịch vụ công qua cảm nhận và trải nghiệm của người dân địa phương. Từ đó đã giúp cho chúng tôi có những căn cứ cơ sở khoa học và thực tiễn để điều chỉnh và cải thiện hiệu quả công tác phục vụ nhân dân của bộ máy chính quyền chúng tôi.
Poverty remained the most important issue for local people. However, the number of survey respondents who regarded environmental issues as the top concern jumped 10% from 2015. The hike reflected public unrest following the mass fish deaths in central Vietnam during April 2016. The last PAPI report also indicated that local people are increasingly worried about air and water pollution. 67% of people living near rivers said the water quality had declined, while 36% of respondents said air quality had worsened during a 3-year period. Other important issues included employment, economic development, disputes in the East Sea, corruption, and traffic.
It is important to create and promote a culture of openness and transparency in government institutions. This requires a robust legislative regime that enables freedom of information, transparency in decision-making, responsiveness towards citizens, and accountable institutions.
The Provincial Governance and Public Administration Index, or PAPI, is the joint research by the Vietnam Fatherland Front, the Center for Community Development and Support, together with the United Nations Development Program, or UNDP, in Vietnam. PAPI 2016 reflected the experiences of nearly 89,000 respondents across the country. This is the largest social survey in Vietnam to evaluate the efficiency of state governance, policy implementation, and public service delivery. Hello and welcome to Sharing Vietnam. The Provincial Governance and Public Administration Index, or PAPI, has been drawing more and more attention in Vietnam during the reform process. In our program today, we'll get to know the latest insights into the people's major concerns and the quality of state governance in Vietnam, according to the new PAPI report. Our guest today is Mr. Dennis Curry, Assistant Country Director of UNDP in Vietnam. Hello Dennis, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure, thank you.
First of all, could you give us some information on the people's major concerns as indicated in PAPI 2016 compared with the previous years?
Thank you. Well, some of the major concerns continue to be the same, and in particular poverty ranks very highly still in the list of people's concerns, and that's across all income groups. Poorer people are very concerned about poverty, but also high income groups still also concerned about further reducing poverty in Vietnam. Perhaps the biggest change that we see overall this year is the increase in environmental concerns among citizens. And I think that is reflective of the events this year, where there were pollution concerns and incidents, particularly in central Vietnam on the coast. And again, that's what we hope that the value of PAPI can serve, showing a mirror to citizens' concerns, and that those concerns can then be acted on by government, both at the national level in terms of national policy, but also then at the provincial level in terms of provincial governments and their responses and engagements with citizens.
What do you think of the improvements of Vietnam's provincial governance and public administration as indicated in the new PAPI report?
One of the areas of really significant improvement this year is in the area of public service delivery, and in particular around healthcare. So we see an increase in people's responsiveness around the quality of public healthcare, with citizens responding that the quality has improved. And also a dramatic jump, I would say, in the coverage of health insurance, a jump of over 10 percentage points, I think to 72% now with health insurance cover. And that's, we feel, reflective of national policies promoting health insurance. So we see that as a very significant positive step in the area of service delivery.
On the other hand, what do you think of the shortcomings that need to be dealt with?
Many of the dimensions, particularly around corruption, transparency, vertical accountability, we have seen very little change in those over the years of the survey, the now 6 years. And in particular, for example, in the area of corruption, we see a continued increase in citizens' concern in that area, particularly around issues of state employment, nepotism in state employment, corruption in the allocation of land use certificates, corruption or the need for bribery in teacher favoritism to ensure teacher attention. So we do see continued concerns in those areas. And I think in response to those, what we are recommending is that, an overall, a holistic approach to tackling these governance challenges. These areas are all interconnected. Transparency helps to combat corruption. And we have seen strong provincial performers in some of these areas, and clear lessons that can be applied between provinces and practices that can be used to increase transparency, to increase citizen engagement. And these steps, I think, it's evident from the data that these steps can help to improve these perceptions among citizens, and in the end improve the governance service to citizens.
PAPI has attracted increasing attention from Vietnamese authorities. 35 provinces and major cities have issued resolutions, directives and action plans to improve public governance, administrative procedures and public service delivery. 57 provinces and major cities have organized workshops to explore people's feedback reflected by PAPI. At the central level, many PAPI findings are frequently cited in policy platforms to discuss measures to improve public administration. PAPI reports have been regularly delivered to Vietnamese lawmakers ahead of National Assembly meetings in the past 5 years. The index has partially resulted in an initiative to build the draft law on public administration. This is the first draft law that has been proposed by a National Assembly member and included in the agenda throughout the history of the Vietnamese lawmaking body.
Hôm đấy là có cái báo cáo về cái công bố cái chỉ số quản trị và hành chính công cấp tỉnh năm 2012. Thế và lần đầu tiên chúng tôi tiếp cận được những cái tài liệu này, chúng tôi rất phấn khởi, và ngay tại cái hội nghị hôm đó thì tôi đã bày tỏ một cái niềm vui là cái khái niệm về hành chính công đã chợt lóe ra trong đầu tôi.
This is the 6th consecutive year that PAPI has been announced. So what is your assessment of the national trends over the years?
Well, I think within the 5 years we saw today some very interesting data, and in particular in the area of public service delivery, which improved this year, but we also looked at the 5-year trend, and it's a very positive picture. We see almost all provinces improving in that time, only a relatively small number not improving, and none of those with any decreases greater than 5%. I think the greatest decrease was about 4%. Whereas on the other end of the scale, I think we have most, 3/4 or more, of provinces improving over those 5 years, and some of them with very significant increases in the quality or the perception of citizens in terms of the quality of the public services delivered. So that's a very positive picture that we can track over time. Of course, there are dimensions that continue to provide a challenge, though, around corruption, as I said, where we see a continued increase in citizens' concerns around corruption. Corruption being a very difficult issue to tackle, but there are measures that can be taken, policy measures at the national level and the local level, and capacity building measures for public officials that can be taken to tackle that issue.
Well, how do you describe the response from Vietnamese authorities towards PAPI so far?
Well, I think over the years we've welcomed a very a steady increase in engagement in PAPI overall, and that's been very positive for us to observe. So at the provincial level, we see an increasing number of provinces having regional dialogues, having or provincial dialogues around their results, and many also enacting action plans to respond to those results. And more than half now, I believe, have developed and put into action plans that would respond to their scores. So that's an excellent. I mean, that is the overall target of what we're working towards. We don't encourage that, it's a race to the top, but we encourage every province to look at its own performance, look at the areas it's doing well, and look at the areas where it can improve. And today we have speaking representatives from Ben Che and Ninh Thuan provinces, which are two provinces that have engaged with the data, have engaged with the issues that are being examined, and have shown good performance. So for me, the overall message is that success is there for the taking. It's possible to engage in these issues, engage with citizens more, and develop policies that are responsive to citizens' concerns.
Finally, could you give us some information on UNDP's plan to further work with Vietnam in dealing with people's major concerns?
Well, the UN works across a broad range of areas, and you've mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals, and of course the 17 goals to which Vietnam has signed up to and targeted for 2013 are a very ambitious and a broad-reaching agenda. We mentioned the environment, which covers a number of those goals, and the concerns from citizens in the PAPI 2016 survey report. And the UN is working with Vietnam on combating the effects of climate change, adaptation to climate change, and many of those areas. In other areas that I mentioned, in some of the dimensions that continue to be a challenge of corruption, transparency, accountability, the UN is continuing to work with Vietnam in those areas also. There's the law on anti-corruption that's under review, which the UN is working with the government on. We also work with the Government Inspectorate in particular on the UNCAC, which is the UN Convention Against Corruption, and Vietnam will go through its second review in that convention later this year. So there are a lot of these mechanisms that are at play where Vietnam is engaging more and more strongly every year, and the UN is continuing to support in those areas.
Well, Dennis, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing some valuable insights.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Well, that's all for our Sharing Vietnam today. Hopefully, with the active reform agenda of the new government and the engagement of domestic and international organizations, Vietnam will make stronger progress in provincial governance and public administration in the coming years. Thank you so much for watching, and see you again next time.